You know, I've been flying since the mid-'80s. Flew for several years and then kind of got out of it. Life got in the way and started a business and different stuff. Then 2017, I got back in. Now the guy that was with me, he's another experienced pilot. He's been flying for 15, 20 years. Has his own plane for the last 10. And, you know, he's traveled all over the country. Alaska is a haven for pilots, all right? It has more general aviation aircraft than I think any other part of the country. It's like 2/3 the size of the lower 48, you know? So in order to get anywhere, and there's not roads like there is here, so they have airplanes. You know, I told my buddy, you know, I want to go to Alaska. I'd like to take my own plane up there or whatever. And so he said, well, let's take my 182. Our goal was to go there and stay in a few different places and fly to all these little airports and destinations up there. We'd flown, you know, from the coast up, you know, to Anchorage and north of Anchorage, and then to Talkeetna, which is the staging ground for Mount McKinley, which is Denali now, Denali Park. All right, we left Talkeetna, and there was some clouds and some little showers around, but nothing, you know, that we couldn't fly around it. And so we had to fly west to get up on top of the clouds to stay in the clear, because we were visual, we weren't instrument. So we got up on top of the clouds at about 12,000 feet and got on course. We were talking to air traffic control the whole time, so they had us on radar, and we headed on our course. And our course we had set up so that we were basically staying about 4,000 feet over any terrain, over any mountains. We were out about 200 miles, I think, from Anchorage, and we started losing ground speed. You know, the airplane was flying fine and everything, but we weren't going over the ground, which means we were hitting the headwind. The next thing we noticed is the altimeter started going backwards, which means now we're not only making any ground, but the wind is pushing down on us, and the plane couldn't outclimb it. So if we were going along at 140 miles an hour roughly, slowed us down to about 65. So what's that, about 80 mile an hour winds we were hitting, and it was pushing us downward, which then pushed us down into the clouds, you know. So then we switched to, you know, now we're just flying on instruments, GPS, keeping the wings level. And like I said, at one point we got caught in the vortex coming off the mountain, flipped us right over. He leveled us right out, you know, kept us level, straight and level the whole time, kept us away from the mountains. Then the next thing I knew, there was snow in my face, and we were trapped on a snowfield above a big glacier. I think the nearest town was McCarthy, and I'm not sure, but probably 100 miles from it, you know, to our east. I woke up and I felt snow in my face, so I said, geez, I'm alive, you know. I figured, you know, they go down in these scraggly, you know, mountains that I didn't think it was survivable. So he was on top of me. The plane was sitting on its side. He was on top of me, still in his seatbelt. So I shook him and he woke up. The windshield was busted out, so he climbed out the windshield. I got unbuckled and I climbed out. And I looked around, and it was like Jurassic Park, you know. Low clouds, and it was like half-assed snow, rain. So I said, well, you know, I don't know how we just survived that, but our next thing is I don't know how we're going to survive out here. No, there's no trees, there's nothing to start a fire, nothing, you know. I then found that I had sprained my left foot pretty bad, and I couldn't stand on it. And he had smashed his chest, so he didn't know if he had broken ribs or what. So we scrambled around to try to find what gear we could. I mean, we could have probably survived in the airplane a little bit, but we would have froze, you know. So this was our track. This was our track up. along the coast to Homer. We spent, I think, 5 days in Homer and just flying out to different airports all around Homer and hanging out. Then to Anchorage, and then up to Talkeetna. So this was our trip back. We ended up, actually, it wasn't this direct. We had to kind of head this way a little bit to get on top of the clouds. And then we headed back. And, this is the Yukon. So this is the Canadian border right here. So we were right there. Nearest town was McCarthy, which is over in here somewhere. I had brought a mountaineering tent, so 4-season mountaineering tent. So I reached in, or no, he found that on the other side of the plane. The luggage or baggage compartment had broken open, and most of our gear was scattered out across the side of the mountainside. The snow was, I'd say, waist deep of fresh snow on top of ice. So I said, well, we got to get out of this weather, So I tied it up to the airplane. We got all the gear we could out of the airplane. We had some food, some granola bars, some water, different stuff in there. Gathered up all this stuff, took our duffel bags and put them down on the floor so we could lay on those and we wouldn't be on the ice. The wind was blowing, 50 miles an hour. So I got the tent set up, got the fly over it, tried to keep the fly down in the wind, and got him in there. He laid down, and he really never got up after that, hardly. And then I just hunkered down. We were soaking wet by then, but the temperature must not have been that cold because we got cold when the wind blew, but other than that, we really didn't get that cold. After I got out of the plane, the first thing I thought of was that Garmin. I have a Garmin inReach that is a satellite homing device, and you communicate by text on it. So I reached inside the plane. Normally, we try to keep it right on our body somewhere, but I put it right down by my leg in the side pocket. I reached in there, and luckily it was there. I pulled that out, flipped open the side of it, and pushed the SOS button, which sent a signal to Garmin call center, search and rescue call center, which I don't even know where it is. They texted me back within a couple of minutes asking me what my emergency was, and I tried to type it, but it was one of those scroll over and pick a letter, and I ended up texting them some gibberish, and I tried to text them plane crash. They answered us back something, all right, we're working on it, we're getting search and rescue going on it. Where we went down is the Wrangell St. Elias Park is the largest national park in North America. Okay, it covers hundreds of square miles, all very remote. There's hardly any buildings. I don't even think there's a town in it. So during that afternoon, they sent us different messages. The first message was that they were sending a local guy that had a lodge near us. I don't know how far, 50, 40 miles, I don't know. And he was going to try to get to us. He was a backcountry pilot. So he had a Super Cub with skis on, and he was going to try to get to us. He told me after that, he goes, I come up over the glacier, flying up the glacier, and he said the wind was so strong. He says, I've flown up here my entire life, thousands of hours. And he said, I've only hit a wind like that 3 times in my life. He said it was one of the strongest winds I've ever tried to fly in. In Alaska, the Air National Guard does the inland rescues up there. These guys were already on a rescue not far from us, but they couldn't get to these guys either. And so they then went right to trying to get to us, and they ran into the same thing. I talked to the pilot of the helicopter. It's a modified version of a Black Hawk that's modified for search and rescue. So anyways, he said same thing this other guy said, is he said we tried to get up over the glacier and the wind was so strong we just stopped, he said. And so they would then go down, and they were staging the aircraft in a meadow down below the glacier, and they just wait. They also had a C-130, big 4-engine aircraft. They use them for weather, their cargo plane. Well, this C-130 circled the area the whole time we were there. So they were calling weather back to the helicopter. So when they got a break in the weather, they tell the helicopter, and the helicopter would try to get to us. So I think he told me he tried that first day and night 16 times to get to us. And they got within a mile of us. It was the closest they could get. They had a couple search and rescue guys there. They had talked about dropping them on skis and having them try to get to us on skis. They had talked about dropping supplies to us and different stuff, because my sleeping bags were scattered across the mountain, so I couldn't get to them. Warm clothing, boots, all that stuff, I couldn't get at it. So we got through the first night. Like I said, the winds blew 50 miles an hour or more, and I had a heck of a time keeping the tent fly down and so on. So the next day, it wasn't bad. It dropped to, 6-8 inches of snow that night, and which sealed the tent up nice and kept us warm. We went the whole day, and they kept on site trying to get to us, and they changed out crews 3 times, I think. My buddy, I think he was getting hypothermia. I felt pretty good. I got out of the tent one day that afternoon and walked around a little bit. Found some more supplies, some more water and stuff, and a can of beer, which we had in the cooler. We never drank it, but it was nice out, and that's when I saw the C-130 flying around. So then we just hunkered down, like you said, in and out of sleep the whole time, just resting, talking a little bit, just staying warm, covered up with all the clothing we had, because it was very damp there, because we were in the clouds, in and out of the clouds. So everything, as soon as you took something out of your duffel bag, it was wet in a few minutes, just damp. On that device, I was able to continually communicate with that search and rescue. They'd ask how we were doing and stuff, and what we had for gear, what we had for food and water and stuff. And after we drank our water, I just filled the bottle up with snow and kept it under my clothes and melted the snow. So then we just waited. About 11 o'clock at night, which still was light there. My battery was going dead on the Garmin, so I told them, I'm going to shut it off. There's nothing that you can tell me or do anyways. They're going to get to us, they're going to get to us. So, I said, I don't know if we'll make it through another night up here, depending on the weather. And the pilots said, we're going to get to them. They told my family that there was another storm coming in off of Bay of Alaska or whatever it is, and that they didn't know if, they said they wouldn't be able to try to again for another day or two to get to us. The pilots heard all that, and they said, well, we're going to make an effort to get to them, and about midnight, the weather seemed to start clearing up. When they actually got to us, the sky looked clear to me, The helicopter came, and he made 3 attempts, I think, to land. He was trying to land behind the tent, behind the airplane, on a little ridge. And he'd come down over the cliffs and try to land there, and it didn't feel right to him. So the next time he circled around, and he come back and hovered. Then he made one more circle around, come back. He hovered, and the next thing we knew, a guy had come down on a cable and was yelling to us, he tried to get into the door of the tent. We had the tent sealed down so we wouldn't get cold. We had cut a little hole in the tent so we could see out, talk to them or whatever. And so he opened that hole up and saw us in there. And I was sitting in the tent, and he was laying down in front of him. He reached down to try to get him, and he was in pain and stuff. So he saw me sitting there. He said, "You're coming first," he said. So okay, I'm out of here. I stuck my head out the hole, he grabbed me by the collar and pulled me out, and I told him I couldn't walk on my left leg, and he goes, yeah, I know. Took me over about 50 feet to the under the aircraft and hooked me on a strap and on a cable, and then he got on with me and took me up. They threw me in the back of the corner of the helicopter cabin, and then two guys went down to get my buddy out, laid him out on the floor. I was sitting up, and they, cut his jacket off, or took his jacket off and stuff, and started pumping warm. Got him in a mummy bag, got him warmed back up, and off we went. And we headed for Anchorage to the hospital. So I'm sitting there, and I'm pretty happy, in and out of crying, because we were rescued. It could have been bad, The guy taps me on the shoulder, and it's real loud in the helicopter. You can't hear anything. In fact, they gave us earplugs put in our ears. The guy's trying to tell me something. I don't know. I can't hear what you're saying. So finally he takes his headset off and reaches over and talks right in my ear and says, look out there, they're refueling us. This is where we actually, somewhere in this area is where we went down. I kind of think it's here is where we ended up. We flew down this valley here, and somewhere in this area. It could have been this field here, but
you think it was over there?
Yeah, because there was a mountain in front of us that was in front of us in the big glacier. But you can see the crevasses where we were. They told us on that when they were communicating with us, try not to walk around looking for your stuff because there's crevasses there and stuff. So, but this was the area where we were, somewhere on this mountainside here. You're reflecting on your family. I mean, that was a big part of it, I think. I mean, going down was the most terrifying. Once you went down into those clouds, and the mountains were surrounding us, nasty, snowy cliffs and scraggly mountaintops. And, that was probably the scariest part, was not knowing. And I said, how could you possibly survive a wreck up here, So that was probably the worst part. And there again, reflecting on my family, I'd like to get back to see them one more time, blah, blah, blah. And same thing when you're in the tent, I don't know if he's a God-fearing guy, but I mean, I've been going to church my whole life, and, you talk to God, you do all kinds of stuff, when you're in a situation like that. We got to the hospital, to the emergency room, and they checked us out, did x-rays and all that kind of stuff, and nothing was broken. I had cut my forehead on the dash or something, and then, of course, it was right during COVID, right? So, the first thing they did was test us for COVID. So they tested, and I had a guy that was working, I don't know if he was a nurse or what, and so he came in and I said, well, how'd my COVID test come out? And he said, you were negative. So then my buddy come in, he hobbled in, he sat there to check on. He goes, I always wanted to check on you, see how you were doing. I'm doing better, blah, blah, blah. So then they came in and said, you got to get back to your room. Oh, okay. Heads back to his room, and the guy comes back. Well, your buddy wasn't as lucky. He tested positive for COVID. So, yeah, it took me, a week or two to get back going, and I was on a brace on my leg, so I was on crutches for a few days and just taking it easy. And, I had just sort of semi-retired from my business. My daughter took it over like the year before, so I was sort of like retired anyways, and so that was one of the things I wanted to do, was go to Alaska. So a lot more of Alaska than most people ever do. Yeah. Yeah, right. So I'd like to. My wife says, no, you're never going back. So sad I put my family through it, that was the worst part. And I mean, it was nothing intentional, but, I think we could have made some better flying decisions, Personally, I don't think I would have flown a plane over those mountains, but like I said, he's a much more experienced pilot than me, he's flown over the Rockies several times, but this pilot that tried to get to us that first day told me, he goes, this is no kind of weather up here. You can't forecast it. And he said, all these different mountains that you go past, they all have their own weather systems that they create themselves. And he goes, you just can't predict it. You shouldn't have been there, is what he said.